Oh, I always love it when I hear recording in progress. This is wonderful. We're here today with Elena Hartwell Taylor, otherwise known as Elena Taylor, for the purposes of today's event. And we're going to talk with her about her second novel in the Bet, Bet Rivers, right?
Yes, Sheriff Bet Rivers. You got it.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to get the sheriff in there up front because she became sheriff.
She
And
did.
following the footsteps of her father. And, I think that probably most folks are pretty much familiar with Elena by now. And I don't want to take up a lot of time because I think you're going to want to talk with her quite a bit. So I am going to start it off just by asking Elena. I'm always curious, and I think most folks are when they're in a particular genre group, why you chose to write in this type of genre and where you got the idea for that and that series. How about we go with it?
That's a great opening question. So my first series was A Funny Private Eye, and I really launched into that because I found my way into mysteries as a young person reading Sue Grafton, Janet Ivanovich, that very sort of first person funny that subgenre. So I had 3 books out in that series, but I had actually written first All We Buried, which is the very first book in the Sheriff Bet Rivers. And I kept working on it and kept working on it. And my agent and I took it out. And it was written before my Eddie Shoes books, but it came out after my Eddie Shoes book. And the reason I made that switch, or why I kept coming back to it and wanting to move that way, is I had been a playwright and had written very serious plays. My content, they were funny, but they were often very heavy and serious. And I had done that for a lot of years, and I sort of needed a break. So I went and wrote these fun private eye books, and I was ready to come back to something more serious. And so in addition to loving the private eye stuff, which I had read as a younger person, I really love police procedurals. I love those sort of dark mysteries where we follow either a police detective or a sheriff or somebody who's a professional. And they have that balance of, they have rules they have to follow, right? They have procedures they have to follow, which I find really fascinating. But simultaneously they're chasing the killer and they're trying to protect everybody, so they have a little bit more to balance than a private eye who can kind of work outside. I mean, they have rules too, but in a fiction they kind of work outside the rules, and our police need to work inside. But then in terms of Sheriff Bet Rivers specifically, I put her in a tiny, tiny little town. So her population, I just realized I need to go look this number up in the previous books because I'm working on book 3 and I can't remember. I think I have the population around 950 people. So it's a very small town. It's very rural. It's very isolated. So here she is, a police officer, right? She is a sheriff and she has rules she has to follow, but she's often without backup, without cell phones, without support. She's alone. So she has to pivot and do things to protect herself and protect her community that aren't like if she was in a big city where she could bring in lots and lots of support. So it allows for me to have all kinds of situation arise where she's balancing, do I do what's right? Do I do what's legal? Do I do what I have to do to keep myself from dying, or do I follow a certain procedure because eventually this could, go to court? And so I like that she has to sort of balance all of those things. So that's how I ended up working back in a police procedural.
Well, Bet is an interesting character. Did you kind of base her on anybody or just kind of make her totally up or?
Yeah, she really came to me very fully formed. The first book, as some of you know, All We Buried, it centers around, it starts off with this deep, dark lake that's in their community, which is, that you can't see the bottom, and it's, 1,000 feet deep. It's one of our Washington State very deep, sort of mysterious lakes that we do have. And I really started from this place of this idea that there could be stuff in a lake like that could be down there that no one would know about because it's simply too deep and too dark to see. And that concept, I just immediately sort of went to, well, who's the one solving the crime? And Bet just showed up. And I knew she was Bet, not Elizabeth, not Liz, not Beth. She was Bet. I knew that she was taking over for her father. I knew that he had died just prior to the first book opening. And so she was grappling with, do I stay? Do I go back to Los Angeles where she was building her own life? Like I knew all of this stuff about her and I knew her as a character even before I sorted out the plot. So apparently she wanted to be written and I'm the writer she chose to sort of channel her. But she did. She came to me very fully formed. I knew that, I knew some of her insecurities. I knew that she had to, win over her father's dog. I knew, that she was going to have to grapple with people seeing her as a sheriff instead of the sheriff's kid. Like I sort of knew all of that coming in. So it was nice because she came in very fully formed.
Cool. Well, I don't want to hog the whole conversation here and make it just an interview. So everybody is muted, and unless you have noise going on in your home, you don't have to do that. You can unmute. And I'm wondering if anybody has a comment about the book or a question for Elena about any part of it, whether it's the plot or the characters or, Janet?
I get asked a lot about the snowstorm. Oh, go ahead. Janet, you had a question?
Oh, yeah. I wondered if you had read J.A. Jan's book with Sheriff Brady. She's very similar, taking over in a small town from her father. I thought, oh, I think I've read this, but
Oh, I've read some J.A. Jans. I read no, what was the one book? Beaumont?
yeah, the Beaumont detective. Yeah.
Those are the ones I know. I didn't know she had another. I'll have to go take a look.
Yeah, Sheriff Brady series. It's an interesting series.
Okay.
It's interesting because it's the same thing. She's small town Arizona.
Yeah, yeah.
Very small town, and took over from her father, and it goes through a lot of similar things that you
Oh,
probably.
very cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to give him a read. I sat next to J.A. Jance one time because I was there as Elena Hartwell, and so J.H. and we sat next to each other. I had the opportunity to talk to her. She's really interesting, but I've only read the Beaumont, so I'll have to go take a look at the Brady stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it'll give me ideas for book 4.
It might. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you start at the end and then work backwards? I mean, do you know where you have to wind up? And then because it just seems like I've tried to do like discovery drafting with a mystery, and it's like I have no idea where I'm going.
Yeah.
So you have to stop at the end. And could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's something that I often recommend. What works for me, and it's going to be a little different for book 3, and I'll talk about that. But typically what I do is I have a sense of the opening. I sort of know what's launching the book, right? Like, the body that they find or who's dead, and who's going to investigate and where it's taking place. And I sort of know that. And then, yes, I figure out basically how it ends. I know, I sort of know what that final climactic scene is going to look like. And oftentimes I even write that. So I have the beginning written and I have the end written. And then I go back to the beginning and I write forward. But I also very much, and it depends a little bit on how well the story's flowing, I often write chapter 1, and then the next day I come back and I reread and tweak chapter 1 and write chapter 2. And then the next day I come back and reread and tweak 1 and 2 and write 3. And I sometimes will just do that until I'm stuck. And then when I'm stuck, I go write the ending. So it varies a little bit about how quickly I know that ending. If I'm going gangbusters, I'm probably just going to keep going and sort of be mulling over that ending. But if I get stuck, I'm actually going to write it. But I'm in a slightly different situation with book 3. So I'm contracted for book 3 with my publisher, and it's coming out in August of 2026. And in order to get contracted, I had to send them a first chapter, but I had to send them an entire synopsis. So I had to write a synopsis for a book I hadn't written, and that is really hard. I am not an outliner. I don't think in that very sort of linear way. Usually I am, as we were just talking about, I'm sort of stumbling through all that in first draft. So my agent and I, oh man, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what was interesting about the process was it started out with a much less exciting ending. And then as I reworked it and reworked it and reworked it, I kept having all these ideas similar to that process that would take months, right, of writing and finding new things. And I was just discovering it in the synopsis. And so ultimately, by the time I was done, I was like, oh, wow, that ending's pretty exciting. Like I didn't quite realize it was going to be that way. But now I'm having to write that book. And it's weird. It's weird because so far, I'm mostly following the synopsis. I feel like I'm still in that world, but I'm discovering things. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, how does that impact this ending that I've already created but haven't written yet? And I'm afraid to write that ending and feel sort of locked in because of all the way it's been set up. So I'm slowly moving forward, slowly moving forward, slowly moving forward, and reminding myself that as long as the book is solid, my publisher's not going to care if I don't actually follow the synopsis completely, right? It will be okay as long as the product is good. But it's a very strange experience for me to have generated that synopsis. So, but yes, if you're stuck, I would absolutely write the ending because it can always change. It can always change. You're not locked in, but it gives you a place to write to, which is a lot easier than kind of getting lost in the weeds. Oops, I think you're muted again. Did you have a follow-up, Annie?
I should mention that
Thumbs up.
and Elena sounds knowledgeable about the writing process. For those of you who are not familiar with her, she does also have a consulting company that she works with writers. She and several other people work with writers. And so she's very knowledgeable of the business. And so if it sounds like she knows what she's talking about, she does. Okay?
And sometimes I even apply it to my own work. Other questions about the book specifically or mysteries?
I had a comment.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the small town aspect, even though I don't recall reading what the population was, because I came from a smaller small town.
Yeah.
So everything worked for me as far as the smallness of it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because, I've been to small towns, I've lived in sort of small towns, but a lot of my small towns have been sort of attached to larger communities. This one is so isolated. So I really had to do a lot of sort of thinking through, they don't have an ambulance. They finally get a private ambulance in book 2. Or they don't have, they can get sort of blocked from, they only have one big road in, and if that's blocked, they're in trouble. And so I'm really appreciate hearing you say that. Thank you.
Was there a model town that you've been to that served as the model?
Yeah,
I had one occur to me, but
well, I'll be curious if I actually used 2. It's actually modeled after 2. I lived in North Bend for several years, and that's actually where the storm was real, and it was modeled after that. And so I lived in North Bend, but as many of you know, North Bend is right off I-90. I mean, it's not isolated in that sense. It's a small town, but it's not isolated. So it's also based in part on Roslyn. If any of you have been to Roslyn. Yeah. So the big cemetery that is just absolutely stolen from Roslyn. And the fact that it had been a coal mining town and all of those things. The original lake is actually based on Lake Boren, which is not very deep, but is very dark, and is in Newcastle, just between Renton and Bellevue. So very, very, but that was the lake which got me thinking about a dark lake because it is very black. And so that was actually the inspiration. But the town itself is, you were guessing, Rosalind. You knew
it
that.
Sounded like it.
Yeah.
My grandparents lived there. So
yeah.
I kept seeing Roslyn in my mind when you're talking about that.
Yeah. You were right. Now, obviously, I've made it a much more isolated place, and I have actually, I can point on a map where my town would be. And I went out, I drove out, I like to do research in real places. And I had driven out, and you can go up this Forest Service road, and it drives up just south of Three Brothers Mountains, and you can drive out there, and you come around a corner, and there's no lake there or town or anything. But I had a moment as it opened up where I went, that's where the town would be. That's absolutely where the town would be. And and you could take a trail out and get down to Ingalls Creek Road, which is real. The campgrounds at Ingalls Creek Road, that's all real. And obviously Cle Elum is real. So I have a real world place. I have some video of the road in to Collier. Hey,
But
Chris.
I really liked how you used the snowstorm to create some pacing in the story and some suspense. But I also want to know what aspects of the story required you to do some research.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So the storm is based on a very real storm. When I lived in North Bend, and I want to say it was 2018. I'd have to double check the year, but I think it was 2018. And North Bend, they might get a couple inches of snow. You might have a week where it's on the ground. Well, in this one particular year, we had 8 weeks of snowfall. I had more than 3.5 feet in front of my house. And as you can imagine, North Bend has one snowplow for the whole valley, right? The entire Snoqualmie Valley had a single snowplow, and they were absolutely overwhelmed. So most of us were sort of snowed in. And it was that storm that prompted this book, because I was like, can you imagine if you were in a town getting buried with snow, you're already isolated, and you find a dead body, or a crime is committed, what are you going to do to solve that crime? Like, your crime scene is covered in snow, and you're stuck, and you're also putting out all these other fires of someone has a heart attack and they can't get him out, and other things that a sheriff is responsible for. So the storm was very real. Now, the truth of it was very, very peaceful. I just stayed home and had food and wrote and read and didn't have to go anywhere. Like, it was super peaceful for me. And my neighbors came and dug us out with a tractor. And so it was, the fictional part was, I didn't have anything scary happening to me during the storm. But in terms of research, so I am very conscious when I'm writing a police procedural that I want to have the behavior of the law enforcement officers be accurate. And that is very important to me, but it has to be balanced with the pace and the speed of fiction. So, for example, Bruce Coffin, who some of you may know, Bruce Coffin is a writer friend of mine, and he was a police officer and writes from that perspective. And he and I have had this conversation about how do you balance accuracy with pace, right? Because the reality is it takes weeks to get DNA back, and fingerprints come back with multiple matches. It's not oh my gosh, we have a match, right? That's not how fingerprinting works. You get several that are similar, right? I mean, and so all of these things in police, it can take a year to bring a case against someone or more. So you can't do that in fiction. So I do have to telescope certain things, but I also like to find ways around it. So for example, I don't rely on DNA for her to solve the crime. She might collect it, right? They may be sending it out, or they may be comparing it to someone, right? Which is different than searching a database. So I try not to rely on those things, which would take a lot longer. But my biggest resource, I have a police officer, I call him my cop. He's my cop. And he is a detective with, he's now at Lake Forest Park. He was in Issaquah when I met him. And I go to him. I love this. So I print out, when I have a pretty solid draft, I print it out, 300 some odd pages in a binder. And I show up in his office or coffee or wherever with post-it notes on all the pages that I have to run something past him. And he knows he's in for a good long visit with me when I show up with my binder. And I'll have generated like, and our rule of thumb is always, never, maybe, right? If a cop would always do something, I make sure that my sheriff does it. If a police officer would never do something, then she can't. I have to figure out, if I've got that in there, I have to figure out something else. If his answer is, well, maybe, I'll be like, great, I can keep it, right? So I really work for accuracy with those kinds of details. And then anything else that's real world, if I use a real place, I want to get it accurate. If I use, I don't use real people. But if I have something that's, genuine in the world, I'm going to do a little bit of research and make sure that I'm sort of getting it correct. But my very favorite way to research is experts. I love to talk to experts. I mean, I do all the Google stuff and I'm looking at maps and going, how far is, I can't tell you how many times I've looked up how far is it from Cle Elum to Ellensburg. I'm always like, I can't, how long does that take? And so those kinds of things I'm going to do research online, but the big stuff I like to run past experts. But the storm damage was real. I experienced that personally, so. And we did have to be dug out by the National Guard. That's also true. So her having to have the National Guard come and dig them out was, or that they were someone that she could call is a real thing. That's a real thing. They will come and dig out your town. We had it in North Bend. Yeah, Joan.
So what is your writing routine and how did you learn your craft?
Oh, what a great question. So my routine is, it varies a little bit, but typically I write 5 or 6 days a week. That's pretty typical. I like to write earlier in the day, because my creative brain is a little better earlier in the day. Editing is absolutely creative, but it's a different kind of creativity. So I can edit later in the afternoon, whereas coming up with new stuff, I sort of need to do in the morning. So I tend to write in the morning. And I tend to, as I mentioned, I tend to go back, read what I wrote prior, and then move into the next scene. And I will go over as much as maybe 40 pages. So I might be 40 pages in and still going back and looking sort of at the beginning. And once I get past that, I'm only backing up a chapter or two, because otherwise you'd spend all your time rereading all those pages. And I'll do that until I have a first draft. And I like, when I'm on a deadline, like I am right now, I tend to do word count requirements. So for example, right now I need to hit 1,000 words a day. I need to be writing 1,000 words a day. To make my first deadline. I have to turn a draft in on September 1. So I need to write 1,000 words a day. And I tend to just, really break it down to that. And I don't even care how good or how bad those 1,000 words are, right? I'm getting those words down. And so that'll be a first draft. I'll do sort of a have to write so many words a day. And then when it comes to rewrite, I like to, after I have the first draft, I'll print it out and I'll have it on hard copy and I'll read the hard copy and I'll make notes on the hard copy. Sometimes I'll even write whole scenes. I always print on one side because I flip the page over and I'll write out whole scenes in longhand if I've got something missing, or I want to add a section, and then I enter all that back into the file on the computer. And then I start back over reading from page 1 and I make changes as I go through, and I'll do that for a couple of rounds. And then it'll go to beta readers, my agent, my editor. This process is going to be a little, slightly different in that my editor is probably going to get it before my beta readers, or she'll get it at the same time, but then I'll incorporate all the feedback on subsequent rounds. Let's see here. What else about, how did I learn my craft? That's such an interesting question. Because, you know, like many of you, I started writing as a kid. I mean, you know, some of you have heard me tell the story. I was 5, I wrote my first book and I stitched it together with embroidery cloth, you know, embroidery thread, and it was illustrated and there were lots of dragons. So, you know, I started writing books when I was 5 and I was a voracious reader, right? I was a very shy kid. I was a voracious reader. My parents were readers. It was very instilled in us. It was okay to read books at the dinner table. We all did it. And so I was very immersed as a young person. And then in my early 20s, I went into theater. And so I became a playwright because I was a writer working in theater. I was not in theater because I was a playwright. I was in theater and a writer. Therefore, that made me a playwright. And that matters. I'll explain why that matters. But I worked in theater for more than 20 years. And that really taught me structure, because you've got 90 minutes, right? If you're writing a one act, or you've got an hour 20, unless you're Tony Kushner, and then you get 4 hours. But for most of us as playwrights, you know, you got 2 hours to hold an audience captive, and every scene has to work. And you got to have a cliffhanger so they come back after intermission. And so I really learned, you know, how to write good dialogue, how to structure scenes, or as we would say, chapters, how to structure scenes that have an arc to themselves that lead you to have to know what happens in the next scene. So I learned all that as a playwright. And as a director, because I did a lot of directing, as a director, you really have to analyze. My cat is very excited to be on Zoom. As a director, you really have to step back and see big picture, and that works really, really well mentally. As a writer, when you're in that rewrite where you want to distance yourself and look big picture, well, you think like a director, which is, are all the actors doing what they're supposed to do? Does the room look like it's supposed to look like? You know, the director's responsible for all of that. Even though they may not be the set designer, they're responsible for, is it cohesive? Is it doing, you know, do we need to add something? And so I can think like a director when I'm doing either editing or rewrites on my own work, where I can sort of step back and say, all the parts have to work, right? It can't just be a good protagonist. You got to have a strong antagonist. It can't just be a good description of what things look like. You also got to know what they sound like. What do they smell like? What do they feel like? Right. And so that allows me to sort of distance myself, to come back in once the book is fully written as a first draft, where I'm just doing whatever I can to get the story together. Does that make sense, Joan?
Yeah. So what made you write mysteries? How did you get interested in those?
Everything I read. I've always read mysteries. And as a playwright, so I started reading mysteries as a kid. My granny introduced me to Agatha Christie and Tony Hillerman, and I found Sue Grafton on my own. I was about 12, I think, when she first hit the scene. And so I've been reading mysteries my entire life. As a playwright, mysteries don't work on stage very well. Typically, the only time you really see a mystery on stage is like dinner theater. It is not what you put on stage. And so I didn't write mysteries until I said, you know what, theater's been great. Oh, this is what I was going to add. Theater's been great and it's enjoyable to be a playwright, but I've always wanted to write a novel. I'm a writer, not just a playwright. And, or I didn't want to only be a playwright. And so I really wanted to write a novel. And so when I went to go write my first book, it was like, well, of course it's going to be a mystery. That's what I read. Right. That is the genre that I read. So I have a historical that may or may not ever go anywhere. It's pretty good, but it needs a lot of work. So I don't know that I would go back to that. But I like there's a lot of subgenres. So I do have a historical mystery that I have been working on. I have, you know, my upcoming book is suspense, and that's the one over here. Which comes out in November, and we're actually taking out as light paranormal, light horror suspense, because those two genres are skyrocketing in sales right now. And there's just enough in the book for that to be legitimate. So we're taking that out as suspense, but also with light paranormal, light horror elements. And so getting to move around within crime fiction is really fun. You know, I have Funny Private Eye, I have dark and atmospheric police procedurals. I've got this suspense. And so we have a lot of freedom as crime fiction writers to move around even within sort of that larger category. But yeah, that was what I read. It was my favorite thing. It's still my favorite thing to read.
I want to go to Susan Van Fleet because she raised her hand way back and I failed to call on you. I'm sorry, Susan.
That's okay. I just wanted to say I have never been on a snowmobile, but I loved the scene, the high-speed chase with the snowmobiles. That was that made me go, oh, it sounds like it was a lot more tiring than I guess I just thought it'd be like riding a bike or something that you don't even have to work at it. But so I just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. And have you ridden one? The way it was laid out, it sounded like you either knew a lot about them or that you were very familiar with them. So
I love that question. So the answer is I've never been on one, but I used to ride sandrails, ATVs out in the desert. So I had that familiarity of it just bangs you around. You are just knocked around. It is physically demanding to ride those. And there's a lot of similarities to the physicality of moving those machines. So I do have someone who rides snowmobiles, and I ran stuff past that person. But it's truly based on, so it's based on reality, but it's based on my experience riding out in the sand. Yeah, so I'm glad that you enjoyed that, because it was a lot of fun to write, because then I was like, oh, and you're also really cold. Like a lot of times riding in the desert, you were really, really hot. You had to worry about heat. Although we did ride at night, in the wintertime, could get very, very cold out in the desert. So I sort of had that too, but that knowing what it is to be sort of engulfed in that snow and that cold weather and flying around, and yeah, so it was partially experience, partially research, and partly fiction. I'm so glad it worked.
We've got more readers here, I think, today, which is normal for a book club, than we have writers. So I'm kind of curious. Some folks have been staying kind of quiet. Some have covered up their screen. I won't bother you guys unless I mute and figure you want to say something. But I'm kind of curious about Brenda D. She does like mysteries mostly over other kinds of related stuff. Did you have any questions or thoughts about the book, Brenda? Did you get a chance to read it? Brenda D? Well, she's not. Oh, you're muted. Okay. Yeah. She doesn't have anything to say. How about the folks that are covered up down there? Delilah or Sheila or Teresa or Brenda C? Everybody's muted, so if you do want to, there you go.
Enjoying listening today.
Oh, yay.
I don't really have a whole lot.
Are you
the questions I had other people ask.
Are you a mystery reader or writer?
Reader, for sure. I don't
Nice.
really write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love readers.
Yeah.
So what appeals to you when you're reading a book? What kinds of things stand out for you? Are you interested in like high action or insider of a police investigation, or what makes you like a book? I'm just curious.
I like a mystery. I like to try to figure it out before the lead character does.
Right. Yeah.
I did notice in your book that, because I had to go back and re-listen to some parts after I finished to make sure I understood things correctly.
Yeah.
And I noticed there were some red herrings in that first couple of chapters. Like when like basically the excuses that makes for or what's the teenager's name again? But the mom and the mom and dad.
Oh, yeah.
And they just want to get him away from this scene.
Yeah.
They want to protect their kid, and like she completely misses clues because she assumes the best in them.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually that's a really great point because that's an example where as often very isolated by herself sheriff, she is responsible for getting the living people down off the mountain. So she has this responsibility for this potential crime that's happened and for, solving what happened to this, dead kid. But then she also has this responsibility. So you're talking about exactly what I was saying before, that it can create complications for your character when they have sort of multiple responsibilities that are in contrast. So you listen to the audio. Isn't the narrator fantastic?
Yes,
I
very
love
good.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And the red herring definitely worked on me because when the reveal happened, I was like, what?
I
It
love
made
that.
sense, but I
But
did not see it
I,
coming at all.
that is absolutely perfect. I think the goal for all of us who write sort of mysteries is we want the reader to be right behind us, right? We don't want him to get ahead of us because it might be satisfying for you, but it sort of means we've failed, right? Like we want you to kind of be right there with us, but also have a moment of, oh, I should have seen that, right? Like that's sort of
Yeah.
that sweet spot. That's that sweet spot.
Yeah, it was like, oh, duh. Yeah.
Perfect. Yay. That's fantastic. Yeah, I really like that narrator, and she did the first book, and I was really, really pleased that she came in to do the second, because it's nice to have that continuity, and also she does such a good job. I got to listen to several auditions. So I was given kind of the short list of multiple to audition. And my husband is a heavy audiobook. He's got ADHD, and audiobooks is how he loves to read. Works much better for him. And so I knew who my favorite was when I listened to all these auditions, but I had him come in and listen, and he agreed that she was the best as well. And she was also my agent's first pick. So all three of us were, like she was definitely the best. But it's amazing to me how audiobook narrators, their ability to shift, just a little shift to show a different character, or how they can, they really make or break a book, with what their voice sounds like, and how they create characters. And so I feel very lucky with her.
Joan?
Yeah, Joan,
How
go
did you
ahead.
find the narrator?
Oh, I didn't. That's on my publisher. So they sent me a short list of auditions, and I had veto power. I got to vote for who I wanted. So they said, here's all the ones that we like. You pick the one you like the best.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've started doing a lot of books by audio, and I like it because when I was growing up, the entertainment was our radio. And
Yeah.
so I can remember sitting there in the dark listening to all these spooky radio
Yeah.
shows that were on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who knows what evil lurks in the heart.
In the hearts of men.
Yeah, so I got so wow. And because your imagination, when somebody's
Mhm.
speaking and you don't really see, it's
No,
different, you know,
it is.
not seeing it laid out for you and said, this is how it looked. And
Yeah.
get to imagine it. And so I've always liked books better. I like movies, but I like books first.
Yeah.
But radio is just the cat's meow. You use that old term from about the fort. I wasn't even born yet when the cat. I love it.
I have to say, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I like to do podcasts when I'm doing like chores, like when I'm doing chores, horse chores and stuff like that. Audiobooks, it's harder for me to concentrate. I end up having to sort of back up and replay something because my mind will sort of wander. But I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts because that gives me a lot of real world how investigations have taken place, which is super useful. So I love the podcast, which I think is sort of tapping into what you're talking about, Linda, of that it's like a radio show to listen to a podcast.
Yeah, I have to confess that on Libro FM, they've been BBC has been offering all these old radio show little recordings, and I've just been scarfing them up.
Nice.
Like, oh goody, I want to go back and listening to that. Take myself. Janet, you unmuted.
Oh, I was wondering how many people in this club read audio, listen to the audiobooks rather than read them.
Is there anyone else who does audiobooks? We got one hand up. Susan does.
I used to do audiobooks, but mostly because I was driving, commuting and whatnot, and
Yeah.
wanted to have that experience, but had to keep my hands on the wheel. I just really love the feel of a book in my hands, and I prefer to read the book as opposed to listen. But I do have a collection of audiobooks, so they're both nice.
Thing is to hold the book and smell the pages and listen at the same time. I gotta tell you.
I also prefer the book, but if I'm in a time crunch, an audiobook is very handy because I can listen to it while I'm doing other necessities.
Yeah, I also have vision problems, so it's hard to focus on a book for that long.
Yeah, that's such a big one. And the older I get and the more I rely on a Kindle where I can blow up the font, the more I'm like, maybe I'll just start listening instead because my eyesight has gotten where text is getting harder and harder.
Well, that's another media, the Kindles, as well as the audio and as well as a regular book. We really have a lot of choices.
Yeah.
The book is so much nicer. Like Linda said, you can smell the paper. It's a tactile feel.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I've had to give away tons of books because I have too many. And the Kindle's nice because
you can keep them all.
keep the book and reread it at some point in time.
Yeah.
And I like that. I don't like giving the books away, but I just have too many of them. So
Do you remember, I don't know how many people, probably most of you, when you were in school, at least in late high school and the one before, whatever that's called, and you actually got new books issued to you, and you sat at the desk and the teacher told you how to, okay, start at the front and then go to the back and then turn the pages so that very carefully, so you kind of broke it in and everything, and I'd be sitting there going snurf because it brings back lots of memories. Susan Van Plu, you unblinked yourself there, and did you do that on purpose?
I'm sorry. What did I do?
You unmuted yourself.
Oh, sorry. Nope.
That's okay. You got so excited. There's Chris. She wants to jump in.
Well, I just want to say I prefer books, not just because I like the feel, but also, especially reading mysteries, I'm less likely to miss something like a clue. But Mark, I have the same problem with having so many books, but there are some organizations like the Get Lit Festival here in Spokane that accept books and they resell them. That's one of their ways of raising funds. So there are some good organizations to donate books to.
and
I have gotten really choosy.
I have donated books before too, so that's
I donate my books to a little free library I started at my church.
Yeah, we have.
And after much encouragement, people are finally starting to take the books after I tackle them and say, take one, please.
Thanks, Danny. She reminds me of the Spokane Library. I think they do it up at Shadle now, don't they, Sheila, up north? Because they're friends of the library and you donate all throughout the year and then they have a sale.
Well, Millwood Farmers Market, also Friends of the Library of Argonne Library is always there for the county. So I just happened to think of that.
We have two.
Go ahead.
We have two little free libraries in the neighborhood, and they get empty sometimes. People really take them.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's if I finish one, usually with a fiction, I will take it over there to the free libraries. We always kind of like, we want to keep the books in the library and keep them going, you know, moving along. So it's great to have them.
Yeah. Well, we've still got another 10, 12 minutes to go. Anybody want to bring up something new and different?
If y'all want to say bad things about the book, I can leave. I don't want to keep you from if you like to also could, but Susan, did you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I remembered what I was going to say. So, um, I wondered why you decided in the middle of everything that was going on, you did this chapter about the horse giving birth. What was
Oh.
I mean, what was the thinking on that?
So that really was about the emphasizing her balancing act of the responsibility she had to the entire community. And what does that look like? And, what could she have walked away? What would she walk away from? Or what would she stick it out and do? So that really came from that. The reason, part of why, I mean, horses are a big part of my life, but part of why there are horses in this is that I did a white elephant gift of naming a horse after somebody's horse. And so I had a Sid that I needed to work into the story as well, because she was the winner. But I would have done it anyways. And it really was, it's that, well, so there was a little scene that came up just today when I was working on the manuscript, or yesterday when I was working on the manuscript, where she has a moment where she says to herself, the world goes on if I solve this or not. My community continues whether I solve this or not. And I like the kind of humanity of I like showing the humanity of police officers. And part of that is, there have been some awful things. Police have done horrible things. I'm not discounting that at all. And the police have, done things that are through racism and all of that kind of stuff. But the police officers that I know, including the man that is my expert, are so committed to helping their community and having a very human side. And I feel like there's a value to showing readers that that's there too. So, when I think about the people, whether it's a firefighter or a police officer or, any of those sort of emergency personnel, the rule of thumb is come home alive, right? Like that's their number one. But within that, they are putting themselves at risk every single day to help their community. And there's something really beautiful about that. And so I don't want them just painted with they're all about gung-ho and chasing criminals and doing all of that. I want there to be this side to them that is human and real, because they are human and real. And so that's what that scene is about. So it sort of came about from a lot of different reasons.
Sheila asked if you could talk about, after maybe Mark's question or whatever, you could
Yeah,
your next book.
absolutely.
Just
Mark,
about what it's about. But Mark, did you have a?
Oh, I was just going to comment that I think those asides are important because it gives you a chance to do character development. And you asked earlier, what do you like about a good
Yeah.
mystery? And to me, it's getting to know those people as well,
Yeah.
and have them be fully fleshed out. I've
Yeah.
read quite a few books where everybody was just paper thin and it didn't feel very real.
Yeah.
So and also it helps the pacing of the book so that
Yeah.
you can have a little downtime to try to just before the big race
Ramp
through
up.
the woods on the snowmobiles. You got to have something there to
Yeah.
slow down a bit.
Yeah, Mark, I love that, and I'm in a small writers group, and they're all, you know, very accomplished published writers. I'm sort of the bottom of the barrel, so I really love working with these guys. And one of the things I always appreciated about them, one of them is sort of much more of a thriller writer. Two of them are much more thriller writers, and you know, I'll be reading a chapter out of the new Bet book, and I'll get things like, now, since you're writing a police procedural, right, and they can really understand that I'm going to have those kinds of moments and those kinds of reveals that they don't have necessarily in their thriller. And so that, you know, that reality of most of us are reading mysteries instead of thrillers because we do want that side by side with the mystery. We want to see who these characters are. I mean, it's almost like the mystery is secondary to the lives of the characters. Like, it's important, and we read because we want to see if we can solve it, or we want to see how it's solved. But if we don't have personality in there, I think we wouldn't go back for another one. I think people wouldn't read the next book because they'd be like, well, the mystery was fine, but I didn't feel connected to the characters. So I appreciate that, Mark.
Mm.
To go to Sheila's question about the next book, The Haunting of Emily Grace. So it is, I like to say it's sort of a combination of Lisa Joel and Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's sort of those two combined. Lisa Joel is one of my favorite suspense authors. So it's the setup, which you find out in the first chapter, so I'm not giving anything away. The setup is a woman whose life has really fallen apart, gets hired to finish a house, a mansion on an isolated island. And the story, it's suspense. So she's not a professional. It's not a murder at the beginning that has to be solved. It's suspense. And so she's a woman who's now in this very strange situation where stuff starts happening around her. And she's wondering, is it in my mind? Is it real? Am I in danger? Is it something supernatural? And what are these events that are happening around her? And so a lot of people sort of point to Rebecca as being the first real suspense novel. And so I kind of, you know, that's why I say it's like that book, even though I don't have her wonderful writing style. But it is very much a character investigation of a woman at the just absolute rock bottom of her life trying to rebuild, and then she finds herself in this situation where kind of everything is going sideways. Thanks, Joe. So that's basically what the new book is about. It was a lot of fun to write suspense. I did not have to do all the research. It was very intuitive because I don't have professional other than the carpentry, but I was a carpenter, so that's okay. I can handle that one. I was a carpenter for a lot of years, so it's part of why I made her a carpenter. It was a good reason to get her out in an unfinished house in an isolated place up here in the islands off the coast of Washington State. And so it was a lot of fun to kind of create the whole world and not have to worry so much about the real world things. It was a lot of fun to write.
I was going to ask, what are you, 80? You've done so many different things for so long, everything. I was a carpenter for a long time. And then I did this for a long time. And this
Well, I was doing them all simultaneously, Linda. That's part of it. So I was a theater carpenter. I did check in with an actual a guy who does permanent construction. I checked in on a couple of things because my carpentry only had to last 6 weeks. You know, it only had to last the run of a show. It comes out on November 4th. Yeah, so it launches November 4th.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it. I know that.
Yay.
Yeah. And I'm gonna have to go back and read some of your funny stuff too. You know.
And that's under Elena Hartwell. But you know what? I think Auntie's carries them or has carried them.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, I think they have done at Auntie's. I need to run by and see if I have copies to sign again. So
Yeah. See, I'm gonna have this in hand because I was signed as well.
Yay.
I gotta have it.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we're up there about another 2-3 minutes. I don't know if you want to stick around for 2 or 3 minutes or if you're done or what. but I'm gonna go ahead and turn the recording off if that's okay, and then we can, you know, like I said before, we can scream or swear or whoops, not, we know what we're doing.